Could World War III really happen? How nuclear weapons and chemical warfare could lead to the apocalypse. President Trump's Tomahawk missile attack on the Syrian regime has caused a spike in tension between the United States and Russia. The whirlwind assault was in response to evidence showing brutal dictator Bashar al-Assad dropped chemical weapons on a rebel-held town. Donald Trump's attack on the Syrian regime could be viewed as a direct affront to Moscow. Russia is a key Syria ally and global nuclear power, so could Putin retaliate and spark World War III? Trump ordered 2 U.S. Navy warships to launch 59 missiles which rained down on an airbase near Homs. Evidence suggests that it was from here that regime planes carrying the murderous gas bombs took off, according to the president. The UK called the deadly riposte, which completely destroyed the base and killed personnel, an appropriate response to Assad's barbaric slaughter of around 100 people, including children. But in a sign of how risky the move was, the Pentagon revealed that it had given prior warning to the Russians before launching the missile strike. Russian President Vladimir Putin has sent more than 4,000 troops to Syria, backed by planes to support Assad, who has been accused of horrific war crimes. Some claim the action, consistently avoided under the Obama administration despite his talk of a red line being crossed, may eventually pave the way to conflict between old foes America and Russia. But others believe the move has made war less of a possibility, including Britain's former ambassador to Moscow, Sir Anthony Brinton, who believes that while Putin is gearing up for war, he doesn't really want one because his military is weaker than the West's. Speaking to the Daily Mirror in October last year, he said, "They do not want war. They would lose. These shows of strength are not an intention to fight, but the signal that fighting must be avoided. But if a third global conflict does break out, how will it start, where would it start, what will it look like, and who's going to win?" Russia and Iran have said they will respond to further American military actions following the U.S. Tomahawk missile strikes in Syria. In a joint statement, the command center for the two countries and allied groups said, "We will respond to any aggression." The statement read, "What America waged an aggression on Syria is a crossing of red lines. From now on we will respond with force to any aggressor or any breach of red lines from whoever it is, and America knows our ability to respond well." Iranian President Hassan Rouhani condemned flagrant U.S. aggression on Syria following the missile strike on a Syrian air base. If World War III does kick off, how could it start? There was a time when it seemed like the prospect of war with the likes of Russia and China had disappeared with the end of the Cold War. But tense relationships between the world's major military players means that the outbreak of another global conflict has been raised again. Russia and America's involvement in the war in Syria has created a situation where the two nations' planes are reportedly flying dangerously close to each other on bombing runs. Strongman Russian leader Vladimir Putin has also deployed warships to the Baltic Sea carrying nuclear-capable missiles. Russian media claimed the ships were strategically placed to have European cities in their sights. Putin's warships also sailed down the English Channel while being man-marked every step of the way by the Royal Navy. In recent years, Russia has engaged in conflicts in Georgia, Syria, and the Ukraine. They have also recently unveiled their Satan II nuclear missile, which is thought to be the most powerful warhead ever made. If World War III does kick off, it seems the Russians will have something to do with it, but it is more likely that if it ever did happen, it would be sparked hundreds of miles away from Syria. An expert claimed Latvia will be ground zero, the country where the next global conflict will begin. Professor Paul D. Miller of the National Defense University in Washington, D.C., who predicted the invasion of Crimea and the Ukraine conflict, said the Baltic state is next on Russia's hit list. But Putin won't use conventional troops. Instead, he will recreate what happened in Ukraine and stir up the patriotism of ethnic Russians in the country. Putin will instigate an ambiguous militarized crisis using deniable proxies, probably in the next 2 years, he said. The shock presidential election win of brash billionaire Trump led to speculation that his fiery temperament could lead to a global war. But the president admitted it is very scary to have his finger on the nuclear button and knows all too well the consequences of his actions. Before launching the Tomahawk strikes on Syria, the tycoon is said to have relied on seasoned military experts rather than the political operatives who had dominated policy in the first weeks of his presidency. One official said, "He had a lot of questions and said he wanted to think about it, but he also had some points he wanted to make. He wanted the options refined." And under the United States Constitution, the president must obtain congressional approval before taking the U.S. to war against a sovereign nation that has not attacked or threatened to attack the U.S. or its allies. And world leaders were quick to praise his response in the hours that followed. Why might someone want to start a deadly global war? A conflict could be deliberately sparked by countries wanting to change the world's balance of power. President Xi Jinping of China made a connection between military strength and being a global power in his Chinese Dream speech. The Chinese premier has envisioned a concept called Gananzhen Guoji Zhenti, which centers around the idea of replacing the U.S. as the world's leading power. China's growing economy means it may want to reorder the global system to play to its strengths. World War III could be a result of China flexing its muscles to sweep the U.S. aside. The two nations are involved in a tense standoff over the South China Sea and Taiwan, which could spark a military incident. But just how long simmering tensions could escalate into a global military conflict remain to be seen. However, both the U.S. and China, major trading partners, would suffer immense economic harm in the event of a war. A war in the Pacific would also cripple China's vital sea trade. Cyber and space, how events could unfold. The terrifying thing about the new global conflict is how much more sophisticated and dangerous warfare techniques are now compared to what we think of conventional warfare. The war would feature domains that didn't feature in previous conflicts, namely cyberspace and space itself. Military satellites are in the Earth's orbiter and more than 80% of NATO's military communications travel on commercial satellites. This makes them targets that are arguably as strategically important as airfields or shipyards. China is said to have incredible anti-satellite capabilities, and Russia is also believed to be working on weapons that will target NATO's space systems. The U.S. military budgeted $5 billion this year for its space war strategy. Cyber warfare is already well underway as Chinese hacking groups have penetrated a U.S. F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. The plane was designed to give Western countries a huge advantage on the battlefield a generation ahead. However, after its hacking activity, China is now preparing to export its own J-31 plane, which is said to look almost completely identical. China is also said to have stolen 1.1 meters fingerprints from the U.S. World War III would involve a high degree of cyber theft and cyber attacks. Russia used cyber attacks to damage communications in their conflict with Ukraine. The U.S. has used the Stuxnet digital weapon to damage Iranian nuclear research facilities. It was recently reported that wealthy tech moguls are preparing for the apocalypse by buying island properties and investing in pimped-out nuclear bunkers. Dinner party conversations in Silicon Valley are now dominated by talk of society crumbling amid nuclear war and what steps the billionaire elites are taking to avoid the fallout, reports The New Yorker. The news outlet spoke with Larry Holm, the CEO of the Survival Condo Project, which is a 15-story nuclear warhead silo in Kansas which has been turned into luxury doomsday properties. In 2008, Hall paid $300,000 for the silo and spent nearly $20 million refurbishing it for anxious wealthy investors. He has now sold all the private apartments, 12 including one for himself, for $3 million each. New Zealand is one of the most popular places in the world for tech moguls to buy apocalypse insurance. A record number of Americans reportedly bought property in the far-flung island nation in the 7 days after Donald Trump's shock election win. LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman told the magazine, saying, "You're buying a house in New Zealand is kind of a wink, wink, say no more." Now images have emerged of some of the luxurious bunkers that the super-rich have been preparing to spend in auspicious Armageddon. The world's filthy rich residents are preparing for nuclear warfare, a disease pandemic, zombie apocalypses and natural disasters by investing in 5-star luxury bunkers. Your father or grandfather's bunker was not very comfortable, Robert Vicino, the CEO of high-end shelter company Vivos, told CNN. They were gray. They were metal, like a ship or something military. And the truth is, mankind cannot survive long-term in such a Spartan, bleak environment. The reinforced homes are being built across the globe from the USA to the Czech Republic. How would the UK perform in World War III? If the recently retired commander of Joint Forces Command Sir Richard Bearns is to be believed, the UK is totally incapable of defending itself against an attack from a country such as Russia. Sir Bearns delivered a scathing assessment of the UK military in a 10-page private memorandum to the Defence Secretary Sir Michael Fallon. His remarks came as the UK announced it would increase defence spending by nearly £5 billion by 2020-21. In a document seen by the Financial Times, Sir Richard Bearns said, "Capability that is foundational to all major armed forces has been withered by design. There is a sense that modern conflict is ordained to be only as small and as short-term as we want to afford, and that is absurd. The failure to come to terms with this will not matter at all if we are lucky in the way the world happens to turn out, but it could matter a very great deal if even a few of the risks now at large conspire against the UK. Who would win the war? This is an impossible question to answer with any certainty, but if you are basing it solely on hardware, it would seem the US is in the best position to win. The US is the only country in possession of 5th-gen fighter jets, 187 F-22s and an F-35 that is not yet out of the testing phase. Russia is developing one stealth fighter and China is working on 4. In terms of submarines, the U.S. Navy has 14 ballistic missile submarines with a combined 280 nuclear missiles. They also possess 4 guided missile submarines with 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles each and 54 nuclear attack submarines. Russia has only 60 submarines, but they are said to have outstanding stealth capabilities. They are also developing a 100-megaton nuclear torpedo. China has 5 nuclear attack submarines, 53 diesel attack submarines, and 4 nuclear ballistic missile submarines to date. However, the emerging superpower is developing more.